So cool. Let's start with the basics. Can you just give us your name and what your deal is?
My name is Piper Kelly. I'm a professional speed climber, currently living in Salt Lake City, Utah, while I train for the Paris Olympics.
Piper started competing in speed climbing 10 years ago as a 14-year-old growing up in Indianapolis, Indiana.
You've been speed climbing long enough that you've seen Team USA really rise to prominence to some extent. Because I feel like a decade ago, when I thought of speed climbing, I thought of Eastern Bloc countries. I thought of, like former USSR, like Asian countries. But you definitely never thought of USA for speed climbing. When has that changed and how has that changed?
Yeah, it's been crazy to see speed climbing in the US kind of as it's changed. I've been around for most of that. I think my first World Cup for speed was Arco in 2018, I think. I left like a week after graduating high school. And it was like me, and then there was a younger woman, and then her mom was actually competing on the US team there because she had just done the national championships just kind of like for fun, because all of her kids are climbers and most of them still are, but she had just done the national championships for fun, and we weren't going to fill up the speed team, and she was going to be in Arco anyway for her daughter. So even though her times were like 45 seconds, she competed in the World Cup.
Piper is talking about Lisa Hammer, matriarch of the Hammer family, whose children have anchored the USA climbing speed team for a better part of a decade. Her son, Zach Hammer, is representing the US in Paris alongside Piper.
It's crazy to think that was 2018, so not even a decade ago, only like 6 years ago. And then now we have probably we're getting medals, we're having multiple finalists in each World Cup, so it's pretty exciting to see kind of the growth that we've
Climbing
made.
Gold is a production of Duct Tape and Beer with support from the North Face. That is a great anecdote to really illustrate the maturity of the team now. Because when you go around one of the competitors' moms competing with her, you're like, restoring health through hydration.
So we've discussed the rise of USA climbing. The Olympics ushered in a new era where the USA, knowing it was light years behind in competition, tightened the screws organizationally and turned the US into a completely legit international force in a fairly quick period of time. Faster than, even their own expectations. For Paris, we were the only country to fill all the potential slots in both boulder and lead and in speed. And, the story of Lisa Hammer and the Arco World Cup illustrates how far that's come just in a few years, really. Like, there's no way that happens in track and field. Like, that doesn't happen in the 100-meter dash at all, period.
But it probably does happen in curling, though. You're like, oh, we can't quite field the team. May as well just like step onto the ice and have a go at the brush or whatever you do. It's like, I'm sure there are some other sort of niche sports where somebody's mom can just be like, oh, I'm here. I may as well just join in. But it is totally outrageous to think that to have your mom basically just compete alongside just because she can. I mean, I think that really speaks to how much USA climbing has matured. That in the last, the 5 years ago, people's moms were competing alongside them just because they were in Europe, and they're like, may as well climb while I'm here because I'm having a good time, and we don't have a full roster. And now 5 years later, we fielded a full team of Olympians to the Olympics, setting world records. Basically, it's all sort of happening, like firing on all cylinders. And you're like, 5 years is not that long of a time to change that much.
So how did we get here? Speed climbing is having a sort of renaissance. World records are falling. American Sam Watson currently holds it at 4.798, and it wouldn't be wild to see that sneak down to 4.5 in Paris. This sport within a sport has always been categorically at the fringe of our broader community, where just a handful of athletes carried the torch, kept this discipline from disappearing altogether. And today, athletes aren't just tasked with training, but unlocking puzzle by designing the most elegant path upward. In rock climbing, there are two important numbers when it comes to speed. One is Sam's 4.798, and the other is 1 hour, 58 minutes, and 7 seconds, the nose speed record. They exist at the opposite ends of the sport and yet come from the same exact DNA. And even more remarkably, from two competitors who met head-to-head in the finals of the first Speed World Championship in 1991. Without their strange, ever-evolving passion for speed and competition, there is no spotlight for our sport's most unique discipline.
I'm Alex Honnold.
I'm Fitzco Hall.
This is Climbing Gold. Welcome to Paris.
Vertical drag racing, part 1. So right now we're watching an old grainy clip from YouTube. It's from 1991 and it's awesome. The sort of setting in the video, it is doing its best job at hammering that home. The judges, there's a bunch of them, they're hovering over enormous PC computers attached to large printers spitting out perforated printing paper. Two very blonde men are flipping golden manes of hair. They're bouncing, they're sort of peacocking around, and they both seem to like the attention. And then they race upward. The climbing isn't slow, but it's, kind of hard to call it fast either. It seems sort of jerky and rushed versus very fluid. They battle upward against each other and the clock. And these two climbers, Hans Florine and Jacky Godoffe, will go on to shape the future of the sport in profound ways.
I was terrible at climbing as far as outdoor climbing, but I just was very comfortable in a competition environment. I knew, like, for instance, the jump and slap, and I just knew not to like fondle and touch holds because like there they are. You don't have any choice. You just execute.
Hans Florine is a professional climber who has really made his name in speed climbing for several decades. He literally wrote the book How to Speed Climb, which I learned how to speed climb from. But he was also an X Games competitor. He has held the speed record on the nose and Yosemite on and off for decades. He's probably the most vocal proponent of competition and speed in climbing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like he's probably done more individually to promote speed climbing than almost any other climber in the world. So describe the early speed comps that you started in.
In the late 80s, most nationals were done at a climbing gym that wasn't prepared to have a national, and they would just not take down the kids' routes over on the left side of the gym, and that would be the speed route. So you could just all holds on, go up over there and just see who gets the fastest time, So there was that, right, in the late 80s. You'd go over and you'd get your time on the route, and there'd be typically two routes trying to make them the same so they could do the single elimination at some point, get us down to 8 competitors, and then 4, and then 2, and then 1. And again, they'd have to add the things because they couldn't have similar routes. And those were always in the gyms were, something where people are not going to fall off. So at most 5'10". There was a weird time in the late 90s where they required, it was ESPN, required everyone to do difficulty and speed. And you can just imagine like Didier Rabitot and Jean-Baptiste Trudeau were like rolling their eyes and they would just get up there and mess around on the routes and just goof around and do figure fours and stuff. And they didn't care if they made it or not. They're like, okay, I did the speed route. Now can we get on to the difficulty? So they were making a little mockery of it.
The X Games were a big deal. Hundreds of thousands of viewers, like tons of people. It's a big thing. Did it feel like competition climbing was having a real moment then? Like it was big?
Oh, yeah.
It's the dawn of a new age, and your perception of sports is about to change.
Get ready for the most exciting event and the most exciting competitor, Hans Florine, in the speed event. Florine on the left-hand side.
1995. The previous 5 years have seen a massive cultural overhaul in America. Tipper Gore had gone to war against hip-hop, slapping explicit lyric stickers on CDs that only made them sell faster. Grunge music and its reluctant superstars embodied the Gen X vibe. Slackers, the outsiders, the anti-jocks. Those same shifts were beginning to happen in the sporting world. This younger generation had no interest in joining their parents' tennis clubs. The ascendant ESPN knew it had an opportunity to cash in and connect a young audience to major brands hungry to get the attention of this new young audience. That summer in Rhode Island, ESPN launched the first ever X Games: skateboarding, rollerblading, street lugging, downhill mountain biking, BMX, bungee jumping, sky surfing, which is doing tricks with a board attached to your feet while you're skydiving upside down. That one didn't stick so much. And sport climbing. It was a powerful moment. And for some people, like Tony Hawk, for instance, it took them out of being fringe legends into household names.
When you hear about the old X Games, I can't help but think of like Happy Gilmore or something like that. Like somebody just showing up total dirtbag in the back of their car being like, could I win a big check? And if I do, if I win some money, like, will I be able to eat for the next couple of weeks? Like, this is incredible. You know, it's like, I think a lot of the old climbing competitions were more like this great opportunity for climbers to be like, wow, I can do something mainstream and maybe make a little bit of money and get a free room for a couple of days and maybe some free food. This is awesome.
Basically, Jeff Lowe tried to get stuff back in 91 onto TV, and it foibled, and they ran, I think, one or two. But, you know, here's 4 or 5 years later, and ESPN is committing to all these wacko sports. And it was pretty wild. I mean, we got a per diem and we got dorm rooms. They put us up like we were like athletes and in the Olympics. It was kind of the Olympic Village, but it was the ESPN Village, the X Games Village.
I'm going to assume there was a lot more debauchery in the ESPN Village.
I don't know why I stayed clear of it. And just like in the Olympics, you know, the athletes go around and watch the javelin thrower and I don't know, the people crewing and stuff. You could go over and watch the street luge, right? These guys would be on the street luge. And can we get on your street luge and try this thing, which is basically a skateboard. You lay down on it. Hope you don't run under a car. I didn't care actually whether it was the future or not. I was just like, this is heck of fun because we're getting, I mean, like the first one was really, I think it was maybe not even $500 to win, but like they had some funds to give you to come, which was cool.
How did competition climbing, particularly speed climbing, change in those years?
What happened at the X Games is that they went from $500, I think, the first year to like $3,000 to like $7,000 the fourth year. And ESPN wanted to be more international. So once the Russians and the Eastern Bloc countries realized there was that much money, they just trained speed only. And they came over and just completely crushed us. And
so how many years did the X Games happen? Or do you know? Like, how many years did you compete at the X Games?
Too many, because I'm I don't gracefully leave competition. But I won the first 3, and then Vladimir won it a couple times, and I kept going and losing. And then I became the announcer like in 2002. So that's 6-7 years. I got laryngitis the year I went to be an announcer, which was weird. And then I tried to compete one more time. And that was probably like 2004 or 5. So I think it went at least 10 or 12 years.
What was happening at the X Games, though, wasn't really resonating in the broader climbing world. It was more a sideshow. But Hans had a sense that the competitive spirit could be brought outdoors, that it would gather attention.
We'll be back with more after the break. Climbing Gold is brought to you by The North Face. I've been a North Face athlete for almost 18 years, and this summer, you can join me and The North Face for a celebration of climbing, culture, and community at ClimbFest. We're sending it big in the Big Apple at the Brooklyn Bridge Park on August 23rd and 24th. Watch her compete in an epic competition that sees athletes race to the top of a 55-foot wall over the water. On the ground, we've got DJ sets, food, exclusive merch, freestanding boulders to climb, and panel discussions led by my fellow North Face athletes and me. Whether you're happiest on the wall or the ground, don't miss the climbing event of the summer. Visit www.thenorthface.com and check out their event section for more info. Or check out our show notes for the link. Hope to see you there. I first found Coros when I was looking for a GPS watch that could track my biggest outdoor adventures. I needed something with a massive battery life that was also robust enough to handle the climbing. As it turns out, Coros is the only GPS watch brand that has done some serious development for climbers, from multi-pitch GPS tracking to indoor programmed workouts. The watches have a mind-blowing battery life. The Vertex watch series lasts for more than 100 hours in GPS activities, so I only need to charge it once every several weeks. I only need to charge my watch so sporadically that I can never find the charger because I haven't used it in 6 weeks. If you're interested in bringing new technology into your climbing training and tracking, you should consider their new Vertex 2S. Go to Coros.com and use the code ClimbingGold to secure a free watch carabiner with the purchase of your new Vertex 2S. The link's in the show notes. One of the recurring themes on Climbing Gold is sort of this adventure versus athleticism side of climbing, like having big adventures outdoors versus like full-on athletic performance. And I think that speed climbing is one of the places where you can really see that contrast highlighted. Were you already interested in speed records outdoors before you started doing competitions indoors? And, you know, like how much interplay was there between those?
Well, I did my first speed competition in 88, 89 prior to ever even climbing the nose. Speed in competitions came first, but I didn't think I was applying it outside. I'm just like, hey, the nose in a day is this like an accountant wants a CPA, right? A climber who's competent at big wall climbing wants to say they've done NIAD.
I mean, so at what point did people outdoors start keeping track of minutes?
In the 90s, numerous people had done nose in a day, and John Mittendorf was kind of the key person who wrote up a beta on how to do the nose in a day. And it was Xavier Boneyard, and I could look on my thing. They had the fastest known time, which was like 9 hours and change. And that was in 1988 or something. Somehow we all knew that. It was in an article or something. They raced it up, but these Europeans did it faster than us, you know. And to that point, it should be noted that Backer and Croft did it in 10 hours, and then they went over and did Half Dome the same day, right? So when I did it with Schneider, we knew that was the mark to beat, was 9:15, and we did it. And as the story goes, Peter Croft and Dave Schultz a week later did it in 6 hours and 40 minutes. We did it in 8 hours. They did it in 6:40. So they took an hour and 25 minutes off our time, right? Just smashing, right? And Peter tells a story like, we weren't going for the record on the nose. We were just doing it to see if we could then do the Salathe later that day, which they failed to do that time. But the next year they did the same thing and did it in 4 hours and 48 minutes. After me and Andy did it in 6 hours, they did it in 4:48, and then they proceeded to race up Salathe afterwards. So as far as like competition on that route, was kind of the thing where it blew up, was 1990, 91, 92. I just thought no way anyone ever would go faster than them.
And I have so many questions about that. I was like, how sad was it for Peter to just crush your record over and over?
I don't think it was sad for him. I mean, I was just like, these guys are immortal. Like Dave Schultz and Peter Croft live in the valley. He's this fancy Canadian guy transplant, and look at, they just live climbing. They're immortal. Of course they're going to go faster than us. And I just thought no way anyone ever would go faster than them. And
yet you did.
Well, the next year I got up the guts. I went to a Peter Croft slideshow, and I'm like, after the show, I'm like timidly, hey, would you climb with me sometime? You know, so people don't think we're like weird rivals or something. He's like, sure. He actually said no, just to mess with me, but he climbed with me like a month and a half later, and we set the record at 4 hours and 22 minutes. So he just was, you know, hey, here's somebody who likes to go climbing, and let's go give it a shot.
So then where to go from there?
From there, you know, the psyche for me was I would be going over to Europe for the competitions, and people I didn't know that were apparently famous climbers would be like, hey, Hans, congratulations on, you know, the speed thing. And I'm like, you know, I beat somebody in the comp the weekend before, and by a half a second I go, well, I got lucky. I just beat him. They're like, no, we're talking about you setting the speed record with Peter Croft on the nose. And I'm like, wow, that was 4 years ago, you know. And I just realized there was all this, I don't know, sort of the Mecca, Yosemite, the nose is the most famous big wall route in the world. And I realized it opened all these doors in Europe for me just because I had done the speed record with Peter, and that lasted 9 years. And it hit me, you know, when Timmy O'Neill and Dean Potter broke the record, I'm like, well, I should try to break it back because it just keeps all these doors open for me in climbing. And all my friends were, you know, married with children then. So they couldn't go up the next day and do it, or the next week. And I teamed up with Jim Herson and did it in 2 minutes faster than Dean and Timmy. And as the story goes, Timmy was supposed to fly home, and he canceled his flight. And like 2 days after me and Jim did it, they did it again, and they broke our record by 33 minutes, which is just an astounding amount of time, like 3 hours and 24 minutes to take. They took 30 minutes off our time. It's just super smoking fast, as you know.
What? And so then what happened?
So then I broke my finger on a climb, and I waited till the next spring, and I asked Yuji if he wanted to come out.
We're talking about Japanese climbing legend Yuji Hirayama.
I knew Yuji was working on the idea of on-site. Was that Salathe?
Yeah, Salathe was the first.
He wanted to yeah. And I said, if we run up the nose real quick, that'll be a nice warm-up to get you used to the granite since you've been away from it so long. And so we went up it in 2 days with him and his friend Kenji, and we tried to free climb it. And we did all but the great roof and the changing corners. But I said, let's just go up, the two of us together. And we went up it the next day and did it in, I don't know, pretty fast. 3 minutes shy of the record.
Oh, wow.
He's like, this is cool. Let's do it again. And I'm like, I got to work, Yuji. So I drove back and was, white collar working for a week. I came back the next weekend and we did it in 2:48, right? And that record lasted 3 years. And the Uber brothers came and, the story goes, the Uber brothers had a million.
Yeah, das Uberbomb. Yeah.
The Huber Bomb, which translates to Huber Boys, Alex and Tomas. The incredible German climbers and brothers who dominated international climbing headlines in the late 90s and early 2000s. Together, they pioneered free ascents on El Cap. Alex pushed free soloing, becoming the first ever to free solo 514, and was one of the best big wall climbers ever. Tomas became one of the greatest alpinists of his generation. They were kind of like a walking Red Bull commercial before that was a thing.
They had like a $1 million filming budget to do a documentary on that and some other climbing they had done. And the interesting thing is they didn't get the record in the movie, but the movie won all these awards, and they, was pretty proud. They came back the next year and sent the speed record without all the cameras and stuff. And Alex emailed me. I was actually over in Europe at the time. He emailed, he goes, I just want to make sure, is the record 2:48.50 or 2:48.30? And I'm like, oh, it's 2:48.50. And he goes, oh, we have the record then by 30 seconds. And they were psyched and they thought, oh, we have to beat it by more than that. So they rested a couple of days and beat it by a good 3-4 minutes. So proud. I actually met them on their way back to Europe and bought them a beer on the way, because I bet somebody $100 that people would break our record, and someone sent me a check for $100. So I used the money to buy beer for the Huber brothers, which wasn't enough for them. But then I just went back. Yuji said, let's do it again. And he came out and we broke the Huber brothers record, big crowd, like TV cameras, the whole works. And Yuji goes, well, I think there's a Japanese TV crew that'll film us doing it. So he came back again in the fall, and we broke our own record again in the fall because they wanted to film it for Japanese TV.
And what time did you get down to then?
2:37 and 5 seconds.
I think it's kind of worth noting that these times now, when you're describing from kind of 3.5 hours down, it's much harder to shave time off than at the beginning. Like when you go from 6 hours to 4 hours and 4 hours to 3 hours, that's all kind of reasonable. When you start shaving below 3, it starts to get pretty hard to cut time. Yeah,
I mean, just as a percentage of the whole, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think, and especially now by modern standards with modern gear, modern ropes, all that stuff, like I think of like a 4-hour nose ascent as kind of fine, but then a 2-hour nose ascent is starting to get pretty freaking hard. There starts to be a big difference. But so I don't know. My point just being that as you're talking about these ascents, you're like, this is all starting to get into pretty elite, like full on racing up the nose, like what you think of as actual speed climbing. So I'm curious for you, what was more personally satisfying, the indoor competition speed results, like winning at the X Games, or the nose speed record and some of the other speed records that you did outside?
Well, they're vastly different. I am a total sucker for a huge crowd and cameras pointed at my face and standing on a podium and having the gold medal, because I know I get all teary-eyed about the Olympics and stuff. So that was really fun. On X Games, I have all these patches on my jacket and I get a gold medal or a trophy. Pretty darn neat. I'm a sucker. But there was nothing like coming down through the forest from El Cap, and people had like apple cider and bubbling apple cider and champagne, sprayed it on me and Yuji, and they were just psyched. And we could hear people yelling for us while we're climbing, thousands of feet up El Cap. It's nothing like that butterflies of being at the base of the nose and just going like, whether you get the record or not, you're like, I'm getting to climb this, 3,000 feet of granite in, a morning probably. And it's just going to be really fun.
In the following years, the nose speed record became the stuff of legend. the time slowly dropping, approaching the tipping point of 2 hours. A time that came with no trophy, other than bragging rights. Ultimately, Alex, the host of Climbing Gold, and Tommy Caldwell took the time all the way down to 1 hour, 58 minutes, and 7 seconds in 2018. Sub 2 hours. While Hans was in a tug-of-war to claim the nose speed record, an annual speed competition in northern Italy started to gain traction around 2000. This event was kind of in stark contrast to the makeshift walls of the X Games. Here's Climbing Gold producer and veteran climbing journalist John Bergman.
It's a region in northern Italy, and there's a river there. It's like a river valley, and there is a dam on the river. And right around 2000, the UIAA, the precursor to the IFSC, started holding an annual speed competition on this dam, on the side of the dam. And to do this, they put holds and they set a route in concrete. And I think two things happen as a result of this. First of all, they hold this event year after year, and they find that, well, it's really hard to change holds that are in concrete, right? So let's just keep the holds in the same place year after year. And the second thing that happens with having this same route year after year is you start to see records being set, right? Like, did somebody do this faster than they did the previous season? And you start to see records being broken. And I think they kind of realized, wow, this is actually really cool to go back to this same route on this side of this dam year after year and compare the times. And I know that the organizers liked it because it eventually became a speed World Cup. It became a stop on the speed circuit. So I think it's like those factors. They wanted to create something that was drastically different. There was also the thought of potential Olympic inclusion and what that would look like and what a route would have to look like for that. And then holding this event on this dam year after year with the holds being in concrete, being kind of fixed in the same place. It was actually Jacky Godoffe, who's the guy who set the route for this.
So Jacky Godoffe, once he saw that there was popularity in speed climbing, this competition was kind of taking off, he pitched the UIA on standardizing the speed route.
And I think it started with a joke.
Jacky Godoffe is a French climbing legend, kind of a lifer. He's been around the scene forever. He's a route setting legend, and most importantly, he invented the speed route.
In a meeting, I say, why won't you do something with a unique hold? That's it. Just a unique hold. The early beginning, everyone laughed and say, okay, no, it's not serious. And then the meeting stopped, and a couple of months later, they get in touch with me and they say, okay, can you make some plans about this? I think it was my wife at this moment that to make a couple of designs, 3 or 4 designs that we proposed. And then very fast, they choose one. I think, yes, in the same year, so in 2004, the route was set. I think the idea for me, this route was set to be similar to the 100 meters race in athleticism. So that means I could do it in a couple of tries in 20 seconds, kind of thing like that. And I imagine in my mind that one day maybe some people could approach to a little bit less than 10 seconds, just to be in the same page with the 100 meter. It was more or less the idea of this concept. But then in Munich there was a sort of funny story, because the first time we set this route, we realized after 3 tries that some of the climbers, especially some girls, were too small to reach the first holes. So we have to add 2 more holes to make them to make it doable for all of them, because we didn't thought that so small people could compete. It was the early beginning, so we had to make mistakes.
Now that you've seen the times get below 5 seconds now, is that how do you react to that? Is that incredible to you?
Yeah, it's totally incredible. It's more than 3 meters per second, just unbelievable. And eventually this concept was good, because I thought after 3 or 4 years, I've asked the federation to change the route, but I realized that none of the athletes wanted to change this route, because just they had their routines. And the route started to be in every country, every gym with special design. And I think maybe the federation international federation was a little bit too lazy to push more. I think they should do that, but they didn't. And anyway, people are still now happy with the speed. And for sure, this route to climb less on around 5 seconds, it needs serious skills. It's crazy.
Yeah. The modern speed route officially was established in 2007. And despite his reluctance, Jacky's route became gospel. It created a single unifying route for athletes around the world to decide who was fastest.
We'll be back with more after the break. Dr. Squatch crafts natural, high-performance personal care products with no harmful ingredients. I don't shower often, but when I do, I use Dr. Squatch. I especially like the Wood Barrel Bourbon Bar Soap. From soap to shampoo to conditioner, they help me look, feel, and smell my best for whatever adventure I choose. They're offering new customers 20% off any purchase with the code ClimbingGold. Or you can go to drsquatch.com/climbinggold. The link's in the show notes. Dr. Squatch. Get dirty, stay clean. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix formulated with a science-backed ratio of sodium to potassium to magnesium. Each packet delivers a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial colors, or other dodgy ingredients. It tastes great, and I've used it extensively on expeditions. And my 2-year-old loves it and calls it sprinkle water. Element is formulated for anyone looking to restore health through hydration and is perfectly suited for athletes, folks who are fasting, or those who follow keto, low-carb, whole food, or paleo diets. Try Element totally risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll refund your order, no questions asked. Get your free sample pack with any Element purchase at drinkelement.com/climbinggold. Be sure to try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. That's drinklmnt.com/climbinggold.
Excited, absolute goal we talked about earlier. I said I want to be the world record holder. Why not me? Why can't I do it? And I can do it, Matt. I can.
This is Sam Watson breaking the world record earlier this year. When you look at speed climbing, on a level, you are one of the world's best speed climbers, right? It's just you do ultramarathon speed climbing. And when you look at this, do you see a fellow speed climber? Like when you look at these Olympians doing their thing?
I mean, when I look at speed climbers, Olympic speed climbers, honestly, it doesn't even, to me, it seems like it's its own unique sport, basically. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with speed climbing big walls and what, historically people thought of as speed climbing on rock. But it is so much more athletic, so much more difficult, so much more inspiring in its own way. You're like, God, it's just so incredible. Physically, it's just such a feat of athleticism. But it feels very far removed from speed climbing a big wall or things, because most of the challenge of speed climbing walls outdoors has more to do with the logistics and the strategy and the rope management, the safety aspects, and like all the other things. And it really has very little to do with the athleticism, which is why I've been a relatively successful speed climber. Because, realistically, I don't really have that good an engine. I'm not that strong. I can't run uphill that fast, but I am efficient and smart about tactics and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at Olympic speed climbers, that's a whole different beast. That's all about the physicality.
Mm-hmm. And you've seen it, up front and close. You've been there, you've watched them compete. Seeing it in person, can you even tell what the hell is going on?
Yeah, watching it in person, in some ways it feels more real because you can see the start, you see the finish, you can take it all in one field of view and be like, wow, that is incredibly long distance very, very quickly. So in some ways it's actually more understandable in person, but then it also feels more incredible in person because the distances seem bigger. Kind of like if you ever watch professional sports, if you see an NFL player running in real life on a sideline and you're like, whoa, they're fast. Because on the television screen, it doesn't really do justice to how much how far they're actually going and how quickly. But then when you see it in real life, you're like, oh my God, there's no way I could move that fast. It's totally incredible.
Yeah, you don't have spatial context. That I totally know that feeling from being on the sideline in an NFL game and be like,
oh my God, that is a very big person.
Yeah, moving so fast.
Moving at exceptional speeds.
Yeah, it'd be like seeing a rhinoceros charge or something where you're like, oh my God, like something that big can move so fast. You're like, that is incredible. Yeah, I feel like speed climbing has the same.
Yeah.
You're just like, wow, that is so fast and so big. You know, I mean, the wall is 45 feet high and you're like, it's like a tall wall in a modern gym. You're kind of like, wow, you just climbed that whole wall in less time than it takes me to tie in.
The 15-meter climb has 3 distinct sections: an explosive opening move, followed by a series of dynos, capped by a leap for the top. Much like specific movements in climbing, each sequence has its own name. These are Olympians Sam Watson, Piper Kelly, and Emma Hunt.
The first move is what's called the Tomoa skip. So it's a match and a step-up dyno. Then
The ladder dyno is like B5, B6 to do well.
And then the one-arm dyno into the Indonesian top.
And then the top section is just climbing the left side of the route, and then you make a dyno to the buzzer and try to hit the buzzer as low as possible on it as well.
It's like one thing to do it, to just do the moves, but another thing to like do it well and fast.
At this point, climbers and coaches have dissected and studied the speed route for nearly 2 decades, refining their beta to an exact science. But it's taken a long time to get here. Almost 10 years ago, John Bergman was reporting on the IFSC Competitions for Climbing magazine. He also witnessed some of the earliest efforts to break the beta in the speed route.
If you look at the route, a speed map, holds 9 and holds 17 they're kind of outliers a little bit. And so even early on, it becomes standard procedure to skip those holds. If you look at how they approached the route, though, they knew that the quickest way to get to the top was to go in as straight of a line as possible from the bottom to the top. But just because it was still kind of early days, their approach was pretty zigzaggy all the way up the route. Even with skipping the 9th hold and the 17th hold, that it helped kind of narrow it to make it more of a straight up and down shot. But it was still kind of zigzaggy. And then 2017, there's another kind of revolutionary thought that happens, which is the speed climbers have this kind of collective idea of, okay, well, we skip holds 9 and 17 because those are the outliers. But like, what if we could skip holds that right now we look at it and we think, yeah, it's pretty necessary. Like, you need that hold. What if we could figure out a way to skip some of those holds? That could cut down the time. And proves to be a monumental thought, and it comes into practice in 2017 when Reza Alipour sets a world record. 5.48 is the time, and he does it by skipping the 4th hold. And the 4th hold, it is a little bit of an outlier when you look at the speed route, but it's not an outlier like 9 and 17 are. So when he does that, I think that just kind of opens up everybody's mind of, oh, it's possible to maybe think outside of the box and start skipping more holds and skipping holds that we kind of think are necessary.
John, what does having a world record do for a sport?
A world record is important in climbing because it's kind of the only universally agreed upon metric for determining the best in the world of climbing. You can't really decide who is the best climber. You ask 5 different people, you're going to get 5 different opinions. And yet, then here comes speed climbing, and here's a world record. And in the climbing community, it's like instant harmony. I just think, like, you ask people in the comp world, who's the best speed climber? They're going to say whoever is holding the world record. And everybody's going to, yeah, that's it. I think there's just something kind of inherently competitive in us as a species where we are just genuinely curious. Whenever you get a group together, there's a genuine curiosity to just know who is the best at whatever in this group. And I think that there's a satisfaction in knowing that. So you just pan out from that. Who's the best in your little group of friends? Okay, well then let's go a little farther. Who's the best at your school? Widen the circle a little bit more. Who's the best in your state? You go far enough, curiosity is going to lead you to, well, who is the best on the entire planet Earth? Right? And so I think That's what I mean when there's this inherent there's an inherent curiosity in us. That's the human aspect.
Next time on Climbing Gold.
They're all doing the craziest things. Like people are jumping, flipping, kicking walls, like grabbing like the railings of the building and like doing crazy pull-ups.
When you are pushing that like 100, 101% is when sometimes you have the really breakthrough times and sometimes you just explode.
I could do a lap without the timer and I could tell you that was a 6-7.
It's like they're squeezing tenths, thousandths of a second out of something. And it's like, okay, what can you do? What can you humanly do?
You can just be like, this effort is this time. And then when you have no effort, you're just like, holy shit, like that was awesome. Why can't every lap be like that?
Climbing Gold is a production of Duct Tape and Beer. Alex Honnold is our host. Our production and editing team includes the talents of Lauren Delaney Miller, Marco Seiler Gonzalez, John Bergman, and Evan Phillips. Skylar Perwins is our YouTube and social media editor. Music today by Brendan O'Connell, Anders, Strange Night, and Lightspeak. Tracks are courtesy of the artists or Track Club. Our creative director is me, Fitz Cahal. Our executive producers are Jonathan Retzik and Ben Endy for RxR Sports, and Lisi Hendricks and Becca Cahal for Duct Tape and Beer. Thanks for listening.